industry news, machine reviews, interviews, and a lot more right here on the Weld Like Bazza Podcast.
Over 5,000 people every year in the UK take their own lives. 75% of those are men.
Hello and welcome back. After the Easter break, it's time to return to the show, and this week I had the absolute privilege of speaking with Andy Bampton, the project development champion at Andy's Man Club. Tissues at the ready for this one as we dig deep into the Weld Like Bazza podcast. Friendly. Casual.
Chilled.
That's how we are. And the reason why I wanted to get you in is obviously I've had my struggles, and I think this year's been my biggest struggle ever, losing Dad. And because I've done a lot of work on myself previously to that, I've managed to get through this year, even with the deepest and the darkest thoughts. But I don't think if I'd had not done the work over the last 10 years, I don't think I'd have got here to this point. And I'm not the only person, surely, who has felt that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of them. A lot of what we do is giving guys that commonality, if you will. As individuals, as people, we all go through stuff in life.
Yeah.
Some of us are better equipped for dealing with that stuff. Some of us have our own ways of getting through it or dealing with it. Sometimes it can be a culmination of things that happen and can compound each other, shall we say. And if you're in the middle of going through a particular thing and you are struggling your way through it, but you're getting through it, and then something else happens, what do you do? Yeah. And that's where it can become problematic for a lot of people.
I think I can really understand that, because initially when I first realised, going back 10, 12 years ago, I went through a separation. Fell out with my son's mum. On paper, everything were perfect to the outsider. Big house, amazing child. Both had great jobs. There's some that didn't work in the environment at home. A lot of that was to do with communication, I'm sure of. And initially it's a breakup and it's raw, but it's the other things that, as you just pointed out there, that compound. So she leaves, so I've got the mortgage to pay for on my own. And then solicitors get involved because there's a child involved, and solicitors let us... they've left me with something, actually. I think I'll tell it quite humorously, but I'm really bothered about opening the post now, 12 years on, after having to deal with that situation and getting continuous solicitors' letters through the post because of how they're worded and how it comes across. And I do believe in some cases it's designed to almost get a rise out of you. And it was this compound effect of still trying to get on with everything, trying to be a great dad, trying to deal with the separation, dealing with the I told you so's.
Indeed. And then the what ifs. The what ifs are a major player in events, and it's a thing that we as blokes are very good at doing is asking these, well, what if this and what if that? And they can bog you down very much.
Yeah, I agree with that. The what if, especially if you're somebody like me who thinks far too much, as it is.
Again, guilty. Hands firmly up on that one.
Right.
Personally speaking, I've developed over the years, and they have come through lessons that have been learned the hard way, quite a good ability to be able to switch off from stuff.
Okay.
But that can be to my detriment at times, where maybe I shouldn't be switching off to stuff that I do. But it's a self-defense mechanism, innit?
Yeah. How did you get involved with Andy's Man Club? How did all this come about?
So initially, let's sort of take things back a bit and give you a bit of an history of the club itself, just for anybody that is listening and isn't aware of us.
Brilliant.
So Andy's Man Club is named after a young man called Andy Roberts.
Okay.
From Halifax, family from Halifax and what have you. Back in 2016, April, So we've just had that unfortunate anniversary. He took his own life. Off the back of that and the sort of outcome and everything in and amongst around that, his brother-in-law, Luke Ambler, was pro rugby player back in the day, and his mum sort of got together and conversations back and forth and came up with this. They wanted to put something in place to try and stop other families going through that. Their kind of thinking was that if Andy had somebody to talk to about what he was going through, you know, maybe ultimately things that had played out different and he may not have come to those decisions that he did. For my part, it's kind of a slightly different story to the majority. Certainly not on my own, but I didn't actually attend Andy's Man Club for me initially. I went along to take somebody else who was in that place where they needed a bit of backup.
Fantastic, well done.
That was actually my son. He was 21 years old at the time and had made an attempt on his life the previous year in 2017. Part of that process of me trying to find out what I could do as his dad, who were, right, it's my son, I need to fix him, what can I do?
Yeah.
Part of that process was finding Andy's Man Club. Much smaller organisation back then. My local group was in Halifax, actually, which at that time I happened to work in Halifax. So
okay.
I was fortunate that I found them fairly easily.
Right.
They sort of popped up fairly soon in my search sort of thing. So I sort of looked into them and, you know, they seemed to be doing good things. So that process started of getting him to, I'll use the word agree in its loosest sense of form. He more relented eventually. But it took me 8 months to actually get him to go.
Okay. And how did you go about that? How did you...
Conversations. It is, you know, I had to very carefully choose my words. I had to pick my moment when he was in maybe a more receptive frame of mind to go in again and suggest it to him. And like I say, it was a very, very long 8 months in that process.
Right.
He'd been in hospital parts of that time, you know, secure hospital, which as a parent, dropping him off there was absolutely a horrendous experience for us. But very, very much needed to make sure he was still with us through that patch. And we got him there through the doors, January 2018.
Is he still there?
No.
Right.
It's a long story. It's kind of a long story. We got there. I'm trying not to drag because I'd spend a lot of time doing presentations and stuff. So I do try and my best to keep this as real and raw, we call it.
Yeah, just relax and sit back into it. It'll be cool.
So we got him there, drove along. Shea Stadium in Halifax, sporting facility of which we get access to quite a few around the country. We get a lot of support from sports backgrounds. And I fully knew he was going to hate it, which he kind of did, but it worked for him.
Right.
I always say to people, Andy's Man Club is a tool trying to do a specific job. Much like your doctors is a tool, much like counselling is a tool, much like Samaritans is a tool. We've all got the same aim, but maybe slightly different approaches in how to get there. These tools have to be the right tool for the right job, for the right person at the right time.
I agree with that.
And Andy's Man Club was that for my son. And he would tell you himself it saved his life. Absolutely no questions about it.
No questions.
We went every week together. I used to take him down week in, week out, and probably for 3 months or so. And he got what he needed out of it. It taught him lessons about talking. It taught him lessons about opening up and not bottling things inside. And he has taken that forward with him to this day. You know, he is able to recognise since that if he does drop again, and he will go back to his local club on his own accord. He is aware enough to recognise if friends are going through stuff and might just need a bit of backup, and has taken friends along to his local club because he knows what it can do. So for him, knowing that it does exist, is accessible when he should need it, is enough of a tool for the job that he currently needs doing.
Yeah.
He has done counselling and stuff as well. Now that is absolutely not dismissive of that, because we know it very much works for everybody. Has their own approaches to stuff, and my missus has had counselling and found it very, very beneficial.
Me too, yeah, I've had counselling.
The way my son always described it, and it's kind of pertinent, and he went to counselling and thoroughly enjoyed it because he connected with the guy that was delivering that process for him.
And I think that's the situation I had.
It's key. It's absolutely key, is that personal connection.
Yeah.
Now, he didn't particularly get much of anything at all from the therapy itself.
Okay.
But enjoyed spending time with the guy.
Speaking
he made that
somebody.
connection. Yeah. And so the process was valid. But the way he described it, and I've used this analogy to many people and they've been able to really relate, is that when he was in therapy, it was like he was in a goldfish bowl and everybody was looking in at him. Yet when he came to Andy's Man Club, everybody was in that goldfish bowl.
Understood.
And there you go. That's why that, like I said, that analogy is relatable to people who have experienced both. You know, we get a lot of guys that will come to us and say, I've tried therapy and just didn't get on with it.
Okay.
Now, a lot of that does pan out to them be because of the person that was delivering it, or they may have felt, and again, it's very much on a personal basis. I absolutely would not put somebody off going and trying it because, again, it's another tool.
Yeah.
But they either didn't connect with the person or felt the process was a bit too much of a tick box exercise for their particular needs.
And I guess in certain situations, not everybody's got the ability to say, I need to find somebody else because I've not connected with this particular therapist.
Yeah.
I think one of the bits of advice I got when I went and found my first therapist was give them all a call and 9 out of 10 of them will have an answering machine or a voicemail. Leave them a message and listen to their voice if it's their voice on and listen and see if you can initially connect with that voice. I went through that process for about 6 weeks,
right?
Like phoning people.
Again, insider information is absolutely vital, isn't it? And that's probably a great tip for somebody to take going forward. And
my initial person that I went to, I think I saw that person for about 4 years on and off, and we got on great. But I think the thing with therapy is that one-on-one approach sometimes burns itself out as well.
I'm sure it's not something I have personal experience of, but I've had similar conversations, shall we say.
I think it reaches a peak with yourself and that particular therapist, and I think sometimes you can't go any further, or I think sometimes you become a little bit too familiar with each other as well, and it stops being therapy. Whereas I guess the approach that you guys have is, as you just said, everybody's in the goldfish bowl together.
Yeah. What a lot of why we work is, I mentioned before, this commonality. Whatever a person is going through in life is unique to that person.
I agree with that.
Regardless of who they are, what the circumstances are.
Yeah.
Those circumstances around that event, that occasion, whatever, are unique to the individual. Nobody else is going through that exact same process.
Excellently said.
But, and this is where it is a big but to that, what we do find at our groups is there are people that have gone through or are going through or are facing up to going through similar. You mentioned relationship breakups, right?
Yep.
And we are very careful as to what we do share because we do operate on confidentiality.
Yeah.
But many guys go through relationship breakups.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, that breakup is going to be a very personal experience.
It's unique, isn't it, to that one person?
Absolutely. And then between the couple, because nobody else knows what's gone on, you know.
That's right.
And even between that couple, there's going to be a middle ground somewhere where things are seen from different perspectives.
Yes.
No judgment on right or wrong. It just is what it is.
Two different people, two different thought processes, and it's really difficult.
Now, in and amongst around that, exactly as you said, there's all the other stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
Now, what we do find in a lot of cases, when a couple, especially when it's a male-female couple,
okay,
it would normally be the bloke that ends up having to find somewhere else to live. Can bring around a lot of pressures.
Yeah.
So what our guys can talk to each other about is, you know, somebody else might have been through that process and said, well, I went to this organisation, that organisation, so-and-so. I didn't find particularly them too helpful, but this third one really helped me out. So that other guy that is facing that can look at those options, maybe approach them and see if they can help him.
Yes.
What we do is help you find ways that you can help yourself, and then we have got your back while you're going through that process.
Brilliant.
Through those commonalities.
Yeah.
We do follow a format, obviously. We're based on a question and answer format.
Okay.
So all our groups run the same across the country. They all get the same 5 questions that we have every week.
Okay, why don't you fire some of these questions to me? Let's see how I get on.
Right, question 1 is always, how's your week been?
Okay.
It's a conversation starter.
This week, it's been tough in a way because it's coming up to anniversary when my dad passed away or when it started to go really bad for us as a family.
Right.
Regarding my dad passing away. So this week's been emotionally tough. And I've seen it in my mum. She came, I think she wanted to spend a bit of time with my dad and his ashes other day. And she came and she did some painting and she didn't really want to leave.
Yeah.
And it's hard to keep my mum in office.
Just being present.
Yeah.
But there you go. That's a summary of how your week's been.
Question number 1.
Right. So question 2. So that potential to be a little bit of a downer of a question.
Yep.
Question 2, polar opposite. Give us a positive from your week.
Positive from my week was my son, Oliver, 14 years old, excellent kid, excellent martial artist, and he's been training with a UFC trainer this last couple of weeks. And he went back to his old dojo where he hadn't left. He doesn't do much over the Easter period because he's got a Spanish family. So the Spanish family come over, spend a lot of time with him. Then he spends a lot of time with me at work and stuff here. And he got his ass kicked on Wednesday. And he got in the van afterwards and he was really upset with himself. And it wasn't well. He had a bit of a cough and that cough got on top of him when he excelled himself. But it opened a door to a conversation of, did you really think you were going to be able to work on the things you needed to work on in only 2 sessions with your new UFC trainer? And he kind of looked at me as if I was the biggest dickhead in the world at that point because he's 14.
As they do, yeah.
And then in the morning, I woke up and he actually, to say he's nearly 15, he'd actually snuggled back into bed. And I woke up and I was like, I don't seem to have much of this bed to myself. And he's there, sprawled out like a big lad. And morning, how are you doing? Yeah, I feel a little bit better about it today. For me, the highlight was nothing to do with work this week. Nothing to do with any of that. Being able to open that conversation with him and kind of say, did you really think in 2 sessions you were going to be able to work on all the problems? So that was a positive
outcome. And
yeah,
you got a smile on your face while you're talking about that.
Yeah, it does make me smile no matter what he does.
So that's why we have the positive after the possible.
Cool.
Question 3 then is pretty much everything Andy's Man Club exists for.
Right.
It is your chance to unburden.
Right.
We do try and keep it current, so it's something that's bothering you now, but it's anything to get off your chest. Okay.
Right, so this is a really good one, really appropriate. One thing that really pissed me off this week is, I'll just take it back a couple of steps, but it's very present. The idea about this podcast was, my dad was an absolute legend and oracle within the industry. I mean, the best. Absolute, and it was 63 when we lost him, so he was young, and it wasn't meant to happen. It was an horrendous situation, and it shook the entire industry massively. And that's one part of it. The podcast was to keep him involved in the business, right? So have conversations, get people in that's known him maybe longer than me. Yeah. People that he's worked with and people's different takes on stories with my dad. That's how the podcast started, and it's developed into much more than that. We've managed to open conversations within the industry that should have happened 20 years ago, which is why I wanted you to come on, because I think this is a really important part of how we can potentially help people. One way that we're trying to help is by getting young talent back into the industry, let people realize that a job working with your hands is really, really, really important. And it's, and it can have so many good positives. And another way is getting people like yourself in to talk about the fact that people like me actually do struggle. I had somebody come in who has been knocking on the door, trying to kind of open up business only really this last year since dad's gone. Because I think he used to look at dad as a doorstop. He couldn't get past my dad. Okay, and
bit of a hurdle.
Yeah, and but probably very much rightly so. My dad was no dick. He knew exactly who was welcome and who wasn't. He wasn't a fool, my dad, whatsoever. And this he's come on a couple of occasions and been polite, He came on this last occasion this week, turned up unannounced. I'm not going to mention his names because I'll keep that confidentiality as well. And he just insulted the back end out of the podcast and one of the other companies that I've been working really, really closely with, purely because they're one of the companies that really supported me through this last year. Always on the phone, a really, really big company. I need this, I need that. I'm out on site at the moment. I lost 50% of my workforce overnight, and I had to carry on trying to fulfill everything that my customers required from me. This company just looked after me 100%, and we've built such a relationship with them. You'd think that we were intertwined with each other.
Those are the little bits that make the world go round out of that interaction, that bond.
Well, out of that, one of my best mates within the industry is Gary Waterman. Gazza, I phone him up every day, and it's his company that he works for that I've become really kind of involved with, and them likewise with me. And this guy turned around, who's nothing to do with them, and said, "God, what would your dad think about you being, like so close with SWP?" And if we go back 15 years ago, I'd have probably thrown him out and dragged him out of the door by his ankles, told him never to come back again. 15 years on from that, I just went, I'm really busy. I'm going to have to cut this conversation short. Thanks for your time. And I locked up. I went round to my mum. I went, you won't believe what's just happened.
As we do.
So that's a present. That's a present. That's this week. Okay. Yeah. That's
giving you your chance to, like I say, unburden that.
That needed to be unburdened.
The point of that process is you can now put that behind you.
Yeah, until I see him again. But yeah,
but we'll worry about that next time.
Next week when you come back. So, question number 4. So,
after question 3, we aim to get a break in.
Right.
Chance to grab a brew.
Yeah.
Pertinently.
Is that one all right?
It's absolutely spot on.
Sweeteners.
The break is as an important part of that process, because those question 3s can get quite heavy at times. Yeah. People can dig deep into some subject matters.
Yeah.
The break is a little breather, a little time out, like say, grab a brew, have a natter with your mates, whatever.
Right.
Reset before we come back in for 4 and 5.
Right, okay.
Now, 4 and 5 are aimed structurally to bring you back up again. So we've had the down, we've had the up, we've had the down. We want to finish on a high.
Brilliant.
Question 4 is quite often a 2-parter. Sometimes a bit more light-hearted, sometimes a bit more, should we say, reflective, make you think about past events. It could be something along the lines of, let's try and think of some examples. If you could invite any 3 people to dinner, who would it be?
If I could invite 3 people to dinner. Is this anybody?
Anybody, totally anybody at all.
Jimmy Carr.
Good shout.
Buddy Rich. So
that one's gone over my head.
Buddy Rich was classed, and probably still is classed, although he's been long gone for many years, as the world's greatest drummer of all time.
Right.
Jazz drummer, big band jazz drummer. Buddy Rich. Yeah, and I'd get my dad back. Yeah.
That's quite a common one. Yeah. Kind of reflective.
Yeah.
But brings back, it's a positive thought. The whys you'd have them, obviously.
Yeah.
Drummers are obviously an interest there. Your dad speaks for itself.
Yeah.
It could be something a bit more totally uplifting. Where is your happy place and why?
Right, okay.
So for me, I'd answer that. Well, I'll go with me, seeing as you had the last one. Yeah. I'd say my happy place is in the woods.
Right.
Next to a stream, maybe a bit of a waterfall. Sounds right enough on its own.
Brilliant.
But that question would have an and why.
Okay.
Which emphasises the importance of that. Why is that my happy place?
Right, so why is it your happy place?
I do photography as a hobby.
Amazing. Right, well, we can go on the right tangent.
When I'm in that woods, next to the stream, next to the waterfall, with my camera in my hand, I'm thinking about what lens I've got on my camera.
Yeah.
Where's the light coming from?
Yeah.
What settings am I using?
Yeah.
What am I trying to show of that scene that people who see my photograph are going to be able to view?
And are the people that look at your photograph, I guess, going to be able to see what you want them to see?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly that. But giving that and why to that question explains the process of why it's my happy place.
Right.
What it does is show that that task is giving me a process. It's giving me a thought to follow. It blocks out that day-to-day noise that we all need a little time out from.
Right. Okay.
It's positive structure.
Yeah.
It allows other guys in the room to be able to relate,
Yeah.
to think about where their happy place is and why it works for them.
Maybe some guys, this is a reflection I've recently had. Maybe some guys struggle to find the happy place.
Yeah, exactly. And which is why we have the and why. It's as important.
Brilliant.
So question 5, and this is where we're going to test you. Question 5 is a quick fire to finish on.
Right, okay.
Right? Could sometimes be a little bit divisive. Could sometimes be a little bit nonsense.
Right, okay.
So we'll give you a couple of examples. When you're making a cup of tea, do you put your milk in first or after?
No, we had a massive debate about this. Right, cup of tea, water goes in first. You milk it until it's brown, and then you put your milk in after. What about you?
There you go. To be honest, I normally cop out on this question because I've tested both ways, and it makes absolutely no difference. It makes absolutely no difference. If you put your milk in before the hot water, it takes slightly longer to brew, but taste-wise, absolutely no difference.
And I bet you're an expert on that, aren't you, as well?
I've made plenty of cups of tea in my years.
Awesome. Brilliant.
So you can imagine what comes out on the back of that one.
Yeah.
To be fair, more often than not, that's a fairly unanimous answer that it goes in afterwards, but there's normally that one person that will pop up and say, before, just to be awkward.
Cool.
This one's slightly more divisive.
Right.
Bated breath, are you ready?
Right, okay, let me get... I'm a bit sweaty.
Are we sitting comfortably?
I'm sweating, Andy.
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Ooh, now. Right, now, I'll tell you why I'm going to say yeah. I won't ever turn any food down. There's very little that'll turn down. Does it belong on pizza?
Well, you can imagine the debates we've had off the back of that one. Sure.
Right, Andy, I've got a question for you. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
For me, ham and pineapple, absolutely. It's a winning combination.
That's a winning combination, right?
Can't go wrong. But many people will completely balk at the idea. All right, last but not least, here's a completely bonkers one for you.
Okay.
I do not expect an answer.
Right.
Would you rather
Oh, it's a would you rather.
have a nose for a nipple or a nipple for a nose?
Nose for a nipple. Or a nipple for a nose. I can't answer that, Andy.
Just no answer.
That's a bonkers one, that.
Isn't it? But, again, what's all over your face at this moment in time?
A right good smile.
There you go.
That's a funny one, that.
There you go.
I wonder what my dad's thinking.
Oh, I'm sure he's having a chuckle. If we finished on that question 3, when everybody's sharing their troubles,
Yeah.
that stuff can weigh heavy.
Yeah, I can. And to go back a little bit to earlier conversations, quite often when you leave a therapy session with a therapist, having been through a few, I can categorically say quite often it does end on a heavy note.
So what we don't want is people carrying that around with them all week.
And that's a really good point. That's a really good approach, that is.
Yeah. So if we can finish on that high, right? And again, mental health charity sounds a bit bizarre having a laugh, but we actually laugh quite a lot on a Monday night.
Good.
But if we can finish on that high, especially when it's a new guy that's walked in those doors for his first time,
Yeah.
and he can leave laughing and joking about that dumb question with a bunch of blokes he's never met before, what's the bit he's going to take home with him?
He's going to take away that it were actually all right going there.
He's going to leave in a better place than what he walked in.
Completely. And he's going to come back.
And exactly. He's going to want to come back and continue that journey.
Because you don't get through, I'm not going to use the term fix or repair. You just don't get through the stuff that we've got to get through in one session. Do you?
Absolutely. It's a process. Like I said, mentioned earlier, it's we enable you to find ways to help yourself. That is a process, and those processes need putting in place and actioning on. You know, if you can take inspiration from something a guy has said, question 3s, question 4s.
Yeah.
You know, we go back to the relationships today. Some guy said, I went to this organisation to help me with my housing. He's gone and done it. Week back, he can come and talk about it. That's his positive, his question 2. Yeah, I went to such and such that Bob told me about.
Right.
And things are in process. We're getting wheels in motion for finding me somewhere to live.
There's things moving forward. You know, I didn't know where I was last week when I came with this question, but now a week on, I've already had a conversation.
But then his question 3 might be, I've had a solicitor's letter.
Yeah.
You know, to make it relatable.
Yeah, and to make it relatable, that and that is as I started about that those can be really horrific days, and it's only a letter.
Yeah,
I started bringing the post home for my mum to open.
Well, this is again full circle. At risk of sounding repetitive, and I far do not wish to put words into your mouth or thought process into your head. But you say you struggle with opening these letters. Yeah. Is that because of what if is inside them? Yeah,
I'm a massive overthinker. I've done an awful lot of work on myself, as I said, and my mum will openly admit I was a loner as a kid because I was a creative. Yeah, and creatives normally do
a very common thing, you know. Creatives. My son's a musician. He writes, singer, songwriter, whatever. He's been in bands ever since he's been able to play. Photography, creative side.
Extrovert when you want to talk about it, but an introvert, you're really introverted because you kind of just in that little creative zone.
Yeah. I've always been, well, I say always, I've always been happy in my own company.
Me too.
But do enjoy spending time with others, especially when it's a common interest and shared. You know, again, you mentioned this industry, the welding side of things. There is going to be a lot of time when you're on your own.
Well, I'm on my own.
Left alone with your own thoughts.
And that's been one of the biggest things this last year. It took me 45 minutes to walk back into the workshop. So Dad died on the Monday. No, Dad died on the Sunday, and we had the bank holiday Monday off. And I don't think anybody expected me to come back in on the Tuesday. And I just got up like it was a normal day on that Tuesday. And I mean, just got up. Got my work gear on, got my work boots on, walked out, got in my van, drove to work as I normally would on a Tuesday. It wasn't until I put the van round the back and I sat there and I thought, I'll just have 2 minutes. I'd have never done that. I would just jump out, get in, get kettle on, get lights on, get ready for my dad to come in. My dad used to come in about 7:30. But I just thought, I'll just sit in my van. I felt a bit sweaty under armpits and I thought, just been through an ordeal and not had any sleep in the last 3 or 4 days. And then I thought, right, I'll get out my van. And I stood right at the end of the archway there, the tunnel. And I looked at the door and I looked at it for 5 minutes and I thought, take a few deep breaths. Took me 45 minutes to open that door, knowing it would be the first time for the rest of my life that I opened that door without my dad coming in.
Yeah.
It's going back to what you said, it's those little things, isn't it? And from that point, there's been an awful lot of days where I put in excess of 12, 14 hours in on my own. One of the first things Mum said to me was, get a radio. Well, I brought an Alexa and I tell her to shut up more than I do listen to it, to be honest. There's an awful lot of time, which is why I'm really grateful and really thankful for. There's been some people that's really had me back in the industry because I felt that I can't bombard my mum. She's going through the same thing as we are.
And therein lies a prime example of why us as men need an outlet where ANDYSMANCLUB can come in and help.
Yes.
Again, it's not all men, but the majority of men find it far, far easier to speak to a room full of strangers about the stuff that they're going through.
Isn't that funny?
No. It is on the face of it.
Yeah.
But when you ask them why, the resounding answer is burden.
Yes.
Exactly what you just talked about with your mum.
Described.
You don't want to burden your mum with your shit because she's going through her own.
Yeah.
Blokes don't want to burden their partner, their missus, whatever, because they don't want them worrying about them because they're the man. They're supposed to be able to deal with it.
Yeah.
You know, we've all grown up with this man up nonsense, which is very, very damaging as a phrase. And the crux of it comes down to that burden. You keep it bottled up inside because you don't want to burden people that, whether it is family or friends, people you care about as an individual and as them as an individual, you don't want to burden them with your troubles. You don't want that person worrying about you. If you can come along to us, that's all removed in an instant.
Yes. And I can completely relate to that, because recently a friend of mine has said, you're closing yourself off from everybody. In my eyes, I'm not. But in my thought process, don't have very much to talk about other than work. And I know that that particular friend has no idea and no interest about what I do for a living. She just sees me as me, and this is what I do, and I work an awful lot of hours, and she don't understand why. But, you know, she cares about me. She's a friend. But on the other side of it, you know, I've not locked myself away. I've had to work these hours to try and get through this last year, to navigate my own way in a business without my dad, in an industry that everybody looks on him. You know, he's the oracle. So there's a lot of conversations and a lot of times that I've not actually spoke to people purely because I just think, well, nothing's really gone on. I've just been at work. You don't really want to hear about all the shit feelings I've had all week. So I don't really want to talk to you. So
where do those shit feelings go?
Well, normally they keep me up all night.
There you go.
I'll go to sleep because I'm knackered, and within an hour I wake up with the most horrific palpitations, and I feel like I've been dropped from 10 flights above onto the bed. And then I get up and make a cup of tea, which is a bad thing to do at 3 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock. And then I'm back out the door at 5:30, 6 o'clock. And those hard feelings that either get cried out in the workshop when I'm alone, or something triggers it, or they don't come out until Oliver does something stupid. And I'm like, what are you fucking doing? And he gets a bollocking, and I'm like, hang on, wind your neck in a minute, Dad. Yeah, it does need a bollocking over that, but you've just released the entire week on him in about 3 seconds. You know, that's not fair. But at least I can recognise it.
So if I could sit here and offer you a safe space where you could get rid of all that.
Yeah. Completely. And I think
that's what ANDYSMANCLUB does. It's not going to fix it.
No.
It's not going to sort anything out for you.
No.
But what it can do is stop those thoughts spinning circles inside your head. It can give you that little bit of breathing space.
So I'm not the only one with the spinning circles then?
No, absolutely not.
Right, okay.
You're a man.
How
many men do you actually know in your life?
Actually know what goes on in them. Like,
not just how many men do you know?
An awful lot.
I bet you ain't got enough fingers and toes to count them all.
It's a male-orientated industry that I've lived in and worked in my entire life.
How many of those men do you think are sitting at home on a night with thoughts spinning around inside their heads?
Which is why I wanted to get somebody like you on, who can talk from a professional point of view, but a friendly point of view, to let them know that if Barry can have a shit week, so can them.
We'll turn this a little bit dark.
Okay.
Just because it is pertinent and relevant.
Yep.
Over 5,000 people every year in the UK take their own lives. 75% of those are men.
And what's the age group?
The most, well, again, we kind of, there's a lot of stats around. The single biggest danger to any man in the UK under the age of 54. Suicide. Take illnesses, diseases, traffic accidents, workplace accidents. Add them all together, it still doesn't come to the same amount as people as we lose by suicide.
Suicide. And it's a word that we, as a society, we're almost scared to say, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a big part of what we do is awareness. Exactly why we jump on these opportunities for podcasts and stuff.
Yeah.
It comes down to stigma. People are scared of it because they don't understand, they don't know. You know, it's like I said, I didn't join ANDYSMANCLUB for me, I joined for my son. He'd had an attempt.
Yeah.
That's not to say I've not been through my own stuff in life. When I was, I can't remember, 17, 18, whatever.
Yeah.
I still have memories to this day of stood in a phone box with a knife to my wrist.
Right, okay.
I wanted out. I'd had enough by that point, stuff going on and what have you. I actually bottled it, I couldn't go through with it, and I hated myself even more for not having the guts to do it. So I got through that time period. You know, I've had my own kids since then. I've now got 3 absolutely amazing grandkids. I wouldn't have those experiences if I'd not managed to get through that time period.
Yeah.
That experience for me actually gave me a lot of insight, a lot of empathy to be able to get my son through his troubles that he went through when he did.
Yeah.
I was able to share my experience with him so that he knew that I could relate to what he was going through. Completely different stuff, completely different scenario, but I knew how it felt to feel like that.
And I think we become, the more aware we become within ourselves, we become more of an empath, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
We become, I know that I am, I can look at somebody in the industry and go, I'm not going to phone him direct, but I'm going to phone his mate at work and just say, just checking on him because he's not been right this week.
Yeah.
It's a curse sometimes, but it's something that I'm pleased I've developed because I remember reaching out for help and it wasn't anybody's fault, but the person that I reached out to help for help from basically said, well, you've not had your legs blown off in war. You've not fallen out of an aeroplane. You've not been, you've not almost died on the operating table. What reason have you got to feel the way that you're telling me you do? I just don't understand it. It wasn't that person's fault. I think because I think the understanding that we've got now, 10 years on, is a millionfold of what we had 10 years ago.
I'll just pick up on that point again. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I think it's good.
In time, what is kind of a valuable lesson, and I try to explain to a lot of people whenever I can, which is sort of why I'm jumping in. If you have a conversation with that person that has no understanding, be grateful for them that they don't have that understanding, because that means they've never been through that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Never experienced the feelings that we're currently feeling at that time.
And that is the way you've got to take that. And again, I sort of touched on earlier this fear element. The stigmas come from fear because people haven't experienced those sort of thoughts and don't know what it feels like, so they're scared of the unknown. And that goes many things. We have fear of the unknown.
Yeah,
it's part of human nature, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I don't know where this comes from. I don't know who actually said it to me. It's in your head. My response to that was, it actually is. It's there. I can actually feel it. It's actually in my head and it's in my heart and my lungs and my arms and my muscles ache from it. It is inside me. Yeah, 100%. I agree.
Absolutely no less real.
And when they turn around to you and say it's in your head, and I was like, do you know what? I'd hate to be able to sell it in a bottle because it's horrific.
But it's, again, it's quite an oft-used phrase that not all disabilities are visible. And, it's like, would a person judge a deaf person because they can't see that they're deaf? Does it mean they're not deaf because you can't see it? Absolutely not.
That's a really good point.
If somebody's struggling inside, it's not always visible. We often we have this phrase about putting on a mask. Whatever you've got going on inside, you go out into public, you go into your work, whatever, you put this mask on that, I'm a man, I'm fine.
Yeah.
We try and get beneath that mask. Get in one of our groups, those masks are gone.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is exactly why we don't finish on these question 3s. Some of the groups I've sat in, the stuff that people go through is horrendous. And being in the position of being a facilitator, a group leader and what have you, even though finishing on a high, there have been weeks where I've taken some of that stuff home with me and I've had sleepless nights on a Monday night on the back of it, concerned about that person's well-being.
Yeah.
But then you see him back the week after and it's like, he got through, cool, great. And then when you get the feedback that I've never been able to open up like that or this, that, other, we get guys coming in, especially new guys, and we operate on an absolute zero pressure basis. So, we always say at the start that there's no pressure to talk until you're ready to do so. And quite often we'll get through question 1 and you guys will sit there and just pass ball. We'll get to question 2 and they'll go, pass
and
ball.
Is that how you do it? Do you do it in a group and you have a ball that you pass around?
Yeah. But then we'll get to question 3, and as that ball's going around, we always try as far as possible and sit you guys towards the end of the circle so they've got that time to think and listen and stuff.
Okay.
And when they hear what other guys are going through and it gets to them and it all suddenly comes flooding out and you can see the weight lifting off them.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful, it's absolutely amazing.
And have you guys been because obviously you started out as a very small group, giving guys an outlet to get together and talk.
Yeah.
And it's grown to the size it is now, which is huge.
Yeah, we started out, first group was beginning in July 2016.
Right.
9 guys attended first night.
Right.
This week, 4,523 guys.
Right.
Across over 180 groups around the UK. That's in less than 8 years.
To put that into perspective, that's if you had all those guys together, that's the amount of guys that we're pretty much losing, and more so to suicide in a year.
Not all of those are going to ever get to the point of being suicidal.
No.
But, like I mentioned earlier, over 5,000 people in the UK we're losing. 4,500 of those are men.
Yeah.
If you add our 4,500 to those, that's 9,000. That's just unthinkable. Absolutely unthinkable.
You put all those people in one room, that's going to fill a football pitch, isn't it?
Oh, easy.
It's going to fill a football pitch of people.
Fill some stadiums in lower leagues. Never mind,
Yeah.
And put it that way.
And when you look at, and for people trying to imagine how many people that is, if you want to stand back and have a look at all them men in that one area and just think, we need to do something about helping each other out here.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do. Now, we mentioned this, we've gone from 1 to over 180. All of that, when you bear in mind, is, we call it natural expansion.
Right.
So all our groups are run by volunteers.
Right.
We do give them the title of facilitator.
Yeah.
But all those volunteers have started out as that new guy through the door at some point in time.
Wow.
They've all gone through their process and got to the point where they are able and willing to give back and help out.
Fantastic.
Some of those guys will then go on to open new groups.
Right.
So if, for example, we've got Batley Group.
Is that a new one?
It's within the last couple of years. It's fairly
relatively
recent.
new, Batley, isn't it?
Batley Group has come about as an extension from our Dewsbury Group.
Right.
By guys that travelled from Batley to Dewsbury, got the benefit out of it, went through their process, wanted to help out and give back, and then the opportunity has come around for us to expand into Batley, and they've moved over to run the Batley Group for us.
Fantastic.
So all our groups have opened in that way.
Right.
We do operate online as well, so we have areas of the country like Cumbria.
Right.
It's not kind of its own little pocket of the country. It's not the easiest place to get in and out of. We now have a presence in Cumbria off the back of guys that joined our online group, happen to live there. They've made the commitment once they've got through that initial process, being brought on as facilitators, made that commitment to actually travel to go to get the experience of a face-to-face group, gone through our in-house training and opened clubs in Cumbria. Those have then expanded. Like I say, we currently have 7 clubs up in Cumbria.
Wow.
On that sort of basis and using those avenues that are open to us.
And that's something that I wanted to come to. In-house training that you just mentioned, is that in-house because you found that this is what works for you and the way that you guys want your groups to work?
Exactly that. Nail on the head. Now there's a lot of sort of founding basis and structures that we are based on. So our founder Luke, I say his background is in professional rugby. From that, he went on then to be a motivational speaker in his own right.
Okay.
So he still has his own business, totally aside from Andy's Man Club. His Andy's Man Club involvement is entirely voluntary. He's never had a penny out of it.
Brilliant.
So parts of what we do are based on his processes for his business.
Yeah.
Part of it is based on other sort of business models that are out there and tried and tested and proven that do work. So it's kind of a pot of ideas that have those foundations brought together to make fit what we are trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Those have been sort of tweaked a little bit here and there and developed and progressed with over the years. But at the core, it's still that same foundation. It's just a place for guys to have a coffee and have a chat. That's the ultimate core of it. I mentioned we do have these structures in place. There's a question and answer format. We do try and keep them absolutely to a minimum, but there's a couple of rules that we've had to put in place over the years that have come about off the back of instances that have gone on.
Okay.
But one of them is we don't talk about medication. That's one of our rules.
Right.
Because everybody in that room is there as their own person, nobody is there in a professional capacity. So therefore, nobody is qualified to talk about medication.
Right.
That is one of those things that can be really, really detrimental to an individual if they get advice that doesn't fit their situation.
Yes.
Only their doctor knows that.
Yeah.
Because of their history and everything else that's
so
gone
on. Yeah.
So because nobody is there in a professional capacity, like we say, nobody's qualified to give that advice and talk about those things. So it's a rule that we don't do it. Everything that is in place is there for safeguarding measures. It's to make sure that everybody in that room is covered, especially our facilitators. Most of the training is around these safeguarding measures.
Yeah.
It's like I mentioned earlier, it's a confidential environment.
Yeah.
But we do have to have a caveat in place for safeguarding.
Yeah.
So part of the intro, we explain that it is a confidential environment. Everything that is said in that room stays in that room, except if we deem that you are a danger to yourself or to others, then we will contact the relevant authorities.
And you go through that when you start therapy, you sign the form, and basically she's got the number of the person that she's going to call if she really feels that.
So if a guy comes to our group and says, I'm going to go away from this and my life will be at risk.
Or completely.
We will contact
who you need to do.
Relevant authorities.
Yeah.
To ensure the safety of that person.
Yeah.
And that's, it's duty of care stuff. We've got a duty of care to be within that realm of that environment and what it presents.
But that's looking after your men anyway, isn't it? That's
we do also have an EAP in place for all our facilitators to make sure, that, like I said, they've all started as members. We want to make sure they're all as taken care of as we can be.
Looked after.
That is a big part of my job as an employee of the charity now.
Right.
I've gone from, like I said, I've come up from being that new guy through the door to being a facilitator to running a club to now being an employee. So I've got all that experience.
Yeah.
All my fellow colleagues that are doing this job's the same. Have all got the same background and history. They've all been the new guy through the door at the same point.
Yeah.
So a big part of my job is looking after our existing facilitators, making sure them guys are looking after themselves, because it can be a bit of a pitfall that you get a little bit lost in making sure the club's running right and kind of forget about yourself a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
So a big part of my job, like I say, is making sure our guys are looked after, that they're using the groups and not forgetting to use the groups for, why they're still joined, or stuff keeps happening, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And stuff catches you out and jumps back on you when you least expect it as well.
I still very much, part of my job is to visit a different group each week just to make sure it's all going smoothly. But I still am very much a group user.
Okay.
I initially joined because of my son, 2018. 2017 for me was a horrendous year. My son made his attempt in the February. I lost my dad in the May of that year, quite unexpectedly. During that time, I was trying to run a business because my employer was incapacitated. We'll not get into that, but he was away. So I was trying to run that business, make sure it was still going, make sure I still had a job. I ended up losing that job at the end of August of that year, and I'd been in that employment for over 20 years. And yet, as a man, I kind of had my blinkers on. I was focused entirely on my son. My son needs fixing, what can I do? I'd ignored myself. I'd had to deal with that shock. I had that grief, that other, in many respects, it's a loss, it's still a grief. My employment, my future was uncertain. I wasn't sure how I was going to pay my mortgage at the end of the day. My attendance after my son dropped out allowed me to work through those issues.
Yeah.
And amongst everything else, my prime issue was guilt. My son, my fault. It sort of allowed me to work through that. We did get through it. Took a long time. I'm as stubborn as the next man when it comes to looking after myself. But even now, this year has been another tester in many respects. So back in 2017, as well as everything else that were going on, my mum got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, which had been a 2-year battle with medical services to get her actually a diagnosis. During lockdown then, the whole COVID period, she deteriorated to a point where we had to get her put in care. The experience of that for me was quite horrendous because I actually had to end up getting her arrested in order to get her out of the house. Just processes that are in place that I had to make that go through, which was not nice to say the least. It did have its kind of funny moments in there because as they were putting her into the ambulance and strapped her in and everybody took a breather, we were sort of stood around chatting with police and with paramedics and stuff. She actually managed to escape, which were quite funny, but gave a moment of light relief in the horror of that
in
process.
the darkness.
Coming right up to this year, February, we actually lost a colleague suddenly and unexpected. Amazing chap called Darren that did my job, but down on the south coast. We have an internal office chat. Many other people have like teams and stuff that goes about. Well, we have a specific link that's for us in the office. We have a catch up a couple of times a week or whatever. Just jump on if anybody's free. Excuse me. And we'd been on that with him that afternoon as we were all just sort of wrapping up the day. And he'd been in a company doing a presentation talking about ANDYSMANCLUB and what we do and stuff. And for whatever reason, there was one individual in his audience that was really awkward, just very anti for whatever reasons. And it caused him a few issues, a bit of a problem, and it had sort of struck a chord with him. So we tried to lift him up and have a bit of a laugh and joke, just cheer him up. I managed to end the conversation. He was actually quite chuffed because he'd been in the process of booking a holiday for his wife and stepkids and managed to get that all paid for and sorted out. And he dropped dead of a heart attack that night. Completely and utterly rocked us to the core as an entire organisation. Like, wow. We were devastated. But I was able to take that to the groups and offload, you sort of keep going, but it's an outlet again. Put that stuff out there, enable you to sort of face up to it, deal with it. We all got invited down to his funeral, and that was quite an emotional moment. But in the midst of that, then, while we still try to become accustomed to this and adapt, we got word from the care home that my mum's condition had deteriorated. So we all sort of, rallied around, went to visit and stuff, and it were obviously her days were numbered. So we sort of tried to get as much of that contact in as possible. Had a trip down to the south coast to go to Darren's funeral. Come back up that weekend, got the call late at night. You need to get up here. The care home, luckily it's 5 minutes from my house, so I got up there. Lost my mum that weekend. February, March.
There's an awful lot in there, isn't there? Horrendous. There's an awful lot in there.
And it's just like, can this year finish already? Because we barely started to scratch the surface and boom, here we are.
And that's normal man, normal life, everyday situations. And as I said earlier, we've got to reach out because I know that I'm not the only person. You've just described what you've been through in a very, very short episode and period of time.
What did I say right at the beginning? We're all just people. We all go through stuff. And I still very much use the groups as my outlet.
Yeah.
My wife were really close to both my parents. I don't want to bother her with my stuff because she's going through it as well. We do talk a lot and, we'll get each other through stuff. We're very supportive of each other. But I just need that little bit extra and I can access that on a Monday night. Even as an employee, I'm still a user. And
is it always Monday nights?
Yes.
Always. That's one of the standpoints, is it's always a Monday night.
When Andy did what he did, he was found on a Tuesday morning.
Okay.
I said earlier on, the thinking that if he'd had somewhere to go on a Monday night.
On the Monday night.
Maybe things would have played out differently.
So it's always a Monday night.
Monday night. And again, it has a relevance. How many times have we all heard somebody say, I hate Mondays?
Yeah, they wrote a song about it, didn't they?
Well, tell me why I don't like Mondays.
Yeah. So Monday's a shit day, first day of the week.
But it's not, because there's ANDYSMANCLUB on a Monday.
There's ANDYSMANCLUB on a Monday night.
Yeah.
And we can all go and it doesn't matter how small or how big you think your personal situation is. Everybody's in it together to try and get you through.
We do not judge. We do not measure one person's problems against another's.
You can't do it because, as you said right at the very beginning, each and every person's problem is extremely unique.
Exactly.
So it's all right. One person sat there thinking all the weight of the world's on his head and nobody can be suffering any more than him. But that's our unique situation. And that guy's unique situation, he's going to be feeling just like we do.
Yeah. And again, sometimes it's again, I mentioned it earlier on, it's sometimes a culmination of these things.
Yes.
My son, 21 years old, right? He'd been to music college, very creative.
What's he play?
You name it.
Awesome.
Well, not brass,
Right.
but he plays
Everything else.
He started out playing guitar.
Right.
Obviously, that adapted fairly readily to bass. He plays a bit of keys. He plays a bit of drums. He sings.
Awesome.
All self-taught.
Brilliant.
But when he was at his first music college, he lost a friend to suicide.
So it'd have
Massive
been
trigger.
It'd have been what? 19?
16
16.
at college. Yeah.
First
Now-
major loss due to suicide.
He already had bits of stuff going on, dealing with the world as a young man. You know,
Which isn't easy. I've actually got some notes here that it's never appealed to be so hard to get through life sometimes,
no,
does it?
occasion, absolutely. But then in amongst all that happening, we had a family member who were actually my wife's stepdad. But my son had quite a close, he related to him as a granddad, you know, he had a close relationship to him. He had cancer. Now, when he was first diagnosed, he actually got quite a shortish diagnosis, but he managed to stick around for, I think it was just short of 4 years in the end. But it was a process that we were going through. We ended up losing him eventually. It was something else on top of losing his friend. He'd moved out of home in with a relationship with his girlfriend, got their new house. He was into the workplace then, all these pressures that were piling on because he'd internalised it all. He didn't have an outlet. You know, he got to the point where he was drinking too much, which drink is many people use it as a crutch. It's probably the worst thing you can do to yourself when you've got mental health issues.
I wanted to talk about this with you because I've not spoke about it with anybody else, but please continue.
So it's all bits that are piling up. And for everybody at some point, if you've got no outlet for these things, they're going to become a problem.
Do you think sometimes we realise? Do you think sometimes we realise that we're bottling it up? Do you think this is...
Probably not is the easiest answer to that. As much as, and again, it goes back to sort of history and upbringing and this man up thing. And I do firmly believe that expectation is more from within ourselves than anybody else. We expect ourselves as men to be able to get on with it and crack on. With a man, we should be able to.
It's I've got a theory on that. I think, like you said, I think society is a big part of it, and it's an old society thing, isn't it? We are slowly changing a mindset, but I think also part of it's DNA. We were designed to be the runners running through the field trying to catch the food to take back to the cave. And I think part of it is DNA, but it's still not healthy.
That's a funny one because this is why I say it's an internal thing as men.
Yeah.
But you look to nature, to wildlife, got lions, it's the women that do all that sort of work.
Yeah, and
you know, a lot of the more traditional African tribes and stuff, it's the women that are the gatherers, where the men might go out to do the hunting part, but the women are the gatherers and the providers and stuff. But yeah, we've put this, certainly in Western civilization, Western culture,
say then, do you think it's a
onus on ourselves. I'm the man. I need to do this.
Yeah, and I think I've got an awful lot to thank my dad for. Undoubtedly, I don't know how much of it is genetic or learn behaviour or just being a stubborn fucker like he was. But my ability and ambition to be better. And I don't mean that in a competitive way where better than everybody else, but constantly better myself. It's a curse.
Can be if you let it run away with itself.
It's my dad being the oracle, but also my dad was always 6'2.5", always 15 stone brick shit house, never went to the gym in his life, you know, and that 1979 to 1986 look of a man on ITV News, right? That they're all 6'2.5", and they're all 15 fucking stone, and you know, and One of the things growing up was I want to be bigger and stronger than my dad. I was never as tall as my dad.
See, quite conversely, it's a funny one. Quite conversely, my dad were less than tall. I don't know how tall he actually was. I'm going to say 5'6"-ish, 5'7".
Right.
But I was taller than him by my mid-teens.
Right.
Which was a bit of a bane of his life, to be honest. It was quite funny. But his dad was the same build.
Right.
You know, it's always been a strange one. And yet, it's like I'm the oldest of three. So I was quite tall earlier and I've always been more slender in build. My middle brother, he's taller than me now, but has always been a bigger lad.
Right.
My youngest brother, conversely, took more after my dad's side of the family. So he was always...
A little bit shorter?
Less taller growing up. I mean, he's just about caught up eventually.
Oliver's really less tall, my son, but his mum is very less tall.
So my kids then, my daughter takes after me.
Right.
Taller and slender. My son is more my dad.
Right.
He's less tall. He's slowly but surely getting there. I mean, he's in his late 20s now and he's kind of following the process of my younger brother.
Right.
You know, I'm sure he's still not finished his process yet, but it's one of those funny old things, isn't it?
Oliver said to my mum the other day, he's such a comical kid. He's got the most driest, awesome sense of humour you could ever wish to meet. In fact, yeah, he is really cool, and he's been comparing himself to my mum's height since he was the height of her boobs. He was like, I'm up to your boobs now, Nana. I'm now up to your chin. And the other day it was like, I'm actually taller than you. I'm actually taller than you, Nana, by about this much. And she's like, get out. And I think he's been a saviour with his sense of humour and his character for the family, especially my mum, because he is a character. But going back to what we were speaking about, this internal fire, growing up, I wanted to be the best drummer in the world. There's absolutely no doubt about it. My mum will tell you the story of I would pull records out of the record collection at such a young age and dream of the red Porsche and the castle to live in. Okay,
yeah, as you do,
you know, as a drummer. Dad drew me a picture on the wall in my bedroom of a drum kit, and he put my name on the front, like drummers had in the 70s and 80s on the front skin and everything. But then my dad being the oracle in the business that his ambition was, and I want to make this really clear to people that are listening, all my dad wanted out of business was purely to be the master of his own destination. So he didn't get the redundancy letter through the post, or he didn't get told that, well, somebody's going to replace your job. He was just in control of his job. But my dad was a controller. He was a controller to the core of everything. And that's who he was. But ultimately, him being as good as he was meant that I personally, I knew in my head I had to find a way to be even better, but that's me. That's my internal fight, and
that's drive, though, isn't it? That can be if you don't let it run away with itself, that can be a very positive motivation.
Yeah. My dad saw it as a negative because my dad's control and upbringing. My dad came from a family of 7. So I often look at that dynamic and think, how much love was there actually to go around that house when Granddad worked at the mill all hours, Grandma looked after the kids. There were 7 kids in a 3-bedroom house.
A lot of it, I think, is, like you mentioned earlier, a generational thing. You know, it's like our parents grew up as war babies, came from that generation of parents who had gone through that war, all that hardship, all that suffering.
Yes.
And were sort of had to deal with the ramifications of that.
Yeah, definitely.
In that environment. They had to be tough.
Completely.
And a lot of that, probably genuinely from a more positive thing, but got passed on to us. You know, I'm firmly a Gen Xer, and there's many stuff going around at more, especially on the social medias, especially on TikTok and stuff about, you know, people calling out Gen X and this, and everybody, don't do it, leave them alone because they'll hurt you. You know, and it's very funny. But the flip side of that humour is our past, our history, how we were brought up, how we were raised.
Learned behaviour.
You know, whether it is taught or subliminally, you pick up on these things and you do take it into your own morals and aspirations.
Is these numbers and that you spoke about, is it just in the UK, or is this, this blanket of this horrendous situation of people taking their own lives? Is this global? Is this just European? Is this just us in the UK? Does it transpose to America?
There's no short answer to that. We tend to focus on UK numbers
the UK
because that's where we are and that's what we can affect.
Yeah.
I personally spend a lot of time on social media and stuff. I'm really into my music and other hobbies and stuff. So a lot of what I watch and have insights to and stuff does come from across the States. I know their figures are absolutely horrific.
Wow.
And again, it's only what gets shared and is readily accessible as information. I know they have a big problem with their ex-service personnel.
Right.
Becoming homeless, and there's a lot of figures around their ex-services taking their own lives and stuff.
Right. Kind of once they become ex-services, no support for them as such.
Yeah. We do get a lot of interest from random places around the world, really. A lot of bits and bats in Europe sort of wanting to look at what we do and have those connections.
Right.
I know Luke had a meeting last month. It's this year anyway, fairly recently. He went down to London to meet with the American, Surgeon General? So it's their top government person that looks after the medical stuff in America, wanting to find out information about what we do and how we operate to try and, look at what they can take into the States and stuff. So we are heard of, and we do certainly pay attention to other bits and bats that are going on internationally. But in the prime, we do focus on UK because that's where we operate. But it
definitely is global.
Make a change.
It's definitely global, isn't it?
And again, I think there's always going to be some correlations between other things. It's like we have to put up with some shit weather in this country at times of years, especially like at this moment in time, this grey, grim, cold, damp, wet.
It's been a very wet winter.
Seems to be very, very protracted.
It's. I spoke about this with Mum, and Oliver mentioned it the other day. It's been a dark winter this year.
It's just been grim, hasn't it? Just grey and horrible.
It's been dark, and when you're dealing with something like the grief of Dad, which was sudden. We was told on the Tuesday, the minute he got over the infection, he was coming home. On the Saturday morning, I'm watching Oliver train at his martial arts, thinking, I'm going to have to phone the hospital because something internally doesn't feel right. That was the end of everything as we knew it from that phone call. I don't want to talk about my beliefs or what I felt on that day. It was a feeling, and I knew I had to make that phone call. But we were told on the Tuesday, the minute we got Dad over that infection, he was going to come home, he was going to rest, and then they were preparing for the treatment for this extremely rare, horrific situation that he'd found himself in. He'd been battling for over a year, over 18 months in the end, pretty much, with extremely low platelets, and it got passed about from department to department because my dad had a couple of other autoimmune system problems. And it seems now, looking back at the entire story, that he was passed about and nobody really held their hand up until it got to the point where he came into work one day after having his blood test done at Morley, and his nurse had said, I'm going to speak to the doctor, Malcolm, because I don't think you're telling me the truth. I don't think you're as well as you're telling me or pretending to be. And we'd had some struggles this year, and there were January and February of that year that when he died, he didn't come into work very much, and Dad had work and miss my mum's birthday and wedding anniversary because work was that important to him. That's who he was, and January and February, he stayed in bed for a lot of it. He wasn't well, and I knew at that point, I knew that Saturday morning that everything changed in a blink of an eye. And dealing with that and the business, I had to take over the business overnight with this expectation that after these conversations that we've had, probably put on myself, but I probably thought, and I did think, there's a big part of me inside sat there thinking, industry's waiting for me to fail now. My dad were Oracle. Malcolm's best. Industry's watching me. They're waiting for me to fuck up. People's walks in here, right, unoblivious to what they've said. Oh, yeah, we didn't think you'd last a year. And I'm like,
but again, with hindsight, and again, turning things into a positive, without that internal drive, that motivation,
that fight,
that sort of thought process in the background, would you have made it through that year?
The determination and definitely not.
There you go.
And if I hadn't have been through everything in the past and done all the work on myself, I'd have been the one knocking on the door ready to take my own life, I think, this year, because 4 weeks after my dad had died, every single belief process that I ever had in my entire body, soul, mind, entity, I questioned. And I was like, I need to know where my dad is. I need to know how he is. I need to know what he was thinking for those 20 odd hours when he was just laid there. When I got to the hospital, just to put it into perspective, my dad had already suffered this catastrophic bleed because he had no platelets, and they diagnosed him on the Tuesday of this aplastic anemia. But only on the Tuesday they diagnosed him, and he died on the fucking weekend. And I was in this situation where, just have a minute. Back in room, Andy. Back in room.
Are we good?
We're good, mate. We're good. So I get to hospital and my dad's already suffered this bleed, and we watch him die for 20 odd hours. And because everything that went on in that 24-hour, 25-hour period before we actually left the hospital, none of it was an interaction with Dad. It's only things that we could speak out loud. So I had no idea that he'd heard it. I had no idea that he actually knew that I got there in the afternoon when we got there. I've got no idea. There was no way of knowing. Pretty much when they came back from the scan, they said, I'm going to have to call end of life. I don't think it'd be very long. Get in there and spend as much time with him as you can. And what I did say to him that day when I got into the hospital before we had that news was, come on, old lad, you're going to have to fucking dig in now, because I don't think I can fix you from this one, Dad. I need some help. And part of me takes it away that he held on for that 20 odd hours before he finally passed away to dig in, to prove to me that he could dig in, and that's where I get it from, digging in. But going back to where this started from, 4 weeks into this, as the grief starts to build and my mum turned into this absolute machine of a funeral planner. I've done this. We need to do this regarding the business. We need to do this. You need to do this. And I'm thinking, right, I'm just trying to get all the work through the door. 4 weeks into this, I'm thinking, where is me dad? How can I ask if he's all right? How can I talk to him? Will I ever get rid of this pain? This pain that I feel, this void, which, how I look at that is I spent nearly 60, 70 hours a week, most weeks with my dad, because of hours he worked, on top of trying to be father and son out of it, which didn't work right well because we were so wrapped up in work. And this is a void that I felt. This emptiness was not just an emptiness of him, my dad going, but an emptiness of him physically not being around me. And I've worked here since I left school.
Yeah.
This void was massive. It still is. But 4 weeks in, I'm thinking, I've got my life insurance and I might just have to have an accident. And I'm strong enough to kind of think, stop, just you're strong enough to get through that particular time. But I really empathize with the fact that that thought were real, Andy.
Yeah.
That were a proper, that wasn't just a flippant idea. That was a thought. How can I get to my dad? How do I know that he's all right? Well, he's dead. So there's only one way that I can find out if he's all right or not. If I can be with him again, chances are though I'm not going to fucking make it back. But that were a real thought, Andy. So it's real, innit? It's real.
It's absolutely real. You mentioned a couple of bits about your whole way of thinking, your lifestyle, this, that, other. That all ended as well. That was another loss. It's another grief.
Yeah,
I mentioned about the job side for me, for my side of things, losing that job. It was another loss. It is a form of grief.
Yeah.
It's something that you try to deal with in amongst everything else going on. Just to pick up on spending those last moments and wondering if people can hear you, how aware they are. Personally speaking, I firmly believe on some level there is that comprehension there, that understanding. Totally different situation, but I was able to be there for my mum's last moments.
Right.
It had been a long, drawn out, protracted period of years with her. I was able to take a moment in that time where, middle at night, her own room, I was able to hold her hand and say to her, "You've done enough, it's okay, I'll let go."
Yeah.
Within half an hour.
I think looking back at conversations me and Dad had that week, 'cause Dad wouldn't give in. He was coming in here, putting his overalls on, trying to act as if, this was keeping him going, which, to be fair, it probably was. And my dad suffered, I think, from this thing that we're talking about, where he kept it bottled up and he didn't let anybody know that maybe he was scared or worried. And only kind of little clue that I have that potentially was going on with my dad is that my granddad, which is my mum's dad's, currently suffering from dementia. He's in the care home at the bottom of the road, so mum can get to him and spend as much time as she needs with him. And he had to go into care because there's no way that the family could have looked after him where he was living. And my dad's struggling and kind of saying in one breath, you care more about your dad than you do me. But that was my dad's way because he couldn't communicate. He wasn't a good communicator. He'd blurt something out like that because he didn't know how to say it any other way. And I can personally take that on board and say that was just his way. It's taken me a long time to get to that point without thinking, what's he fucking being like that for?
How many times have we said learned habits?
Yes. And it's taken me a long time to kind of just look at that is what my dad would make you feel bad if he felt bad about something because he couldn't admit that it was wrong. That was my dad's way. And it was in the back room when he put the kettle on, and I'd come back from a job and there were 19 emails to reply to, and the phone was screaming, and workshop just seemed at that particular time to be getting busier and busier and busier with repairs. And 90% of my job were out on site trying to clear all that stuff on a daily basis and look after all that side of the business that he physically couldn't do anymore anyway. And I think one of his flippant comments, when he was probably out thinking from internally when he was a bit upset, I think one of his flippant comments was, well, your mum will just be worried about where next wage packet's coming if I drop dead. So I turned around to him. I was just in there and I kind of looked and said, well, if you've done your job right, Dad, you've got nothing to worry about, have you? Because it's all I could think about at the time that would actually relate to him, that could actually say, listen, right, if this is the level of the conversation that we're ever going to get to have about if things go wrong, because you're not capable of sitting down and actually having the conversation with me, then let me tell you that if you've done your job all right, and I'm telling you now you have, that I'll look after my mum and the business, it'll all be all right. And I take a little bit of something from that because I think for that moment, I probably was one of the very few moments that I actually managed to connect to him on a level that only he knew, and that he had to completely understand the code of Malcolm Steele to be able to connect to. And I'm laughing about it, but
maybe it was enough.
Maybe it was enough, And knowing my dad, the stubborn fucker that he was, if he were going to go, he probably planned it. He probably didn't want us to be there to look into his eyes at that last minute, that were probably potentially too hard and damaging for him.
Mm. And I am, again, personal opinions, I kind of am a believer in that if a person makes a choice that they've had enough, that is it. That's their time.
He'd had a big fight with my dad with various illnesses. I remember one night turning up at hospital. I remember phoning my best mate's close protection bodyguard, or was at this particular time. He's been my training partner my entire life. And I'm phoning him, we're going, "What's going on, Bazza? What's going on?" That's just how he speaks to me. He's like 6'4", ginger lad, being like South African origin, proper Yorkshire lad, like salt of earth. "What's going on? What's going on?" I went, "Well, apparently my dad's got an heartbeat of like 260 at top and 5 at bottom or something. So I better get there before something fucking blows." And I'm like, phone me when you get there. Let me know what's going on. And I remember going in and my dad's laid in bed in his work gear with his work boots on and my mum at the side of him. And this is like 15 years ago or something. It's like, "You all right, love? Yeah, everything all right at work?" That was the first thing he said to me. And I went, and I'm looking at this board above his head thinking, I don't think them figures are humanly possible. And like, there's a nurse on phone to somebody in the pharmacy at the hospital, and there's somebody on the phone to cardiology saying, "Well, we might have to put it in this way. We might have to give him this a beta blocker in a drip, so it's got time to filter in." And they got it down overnight. They kicked him out of hospital and sent him home. And the next day, I sent a picture to my best mate, and my dad's got his sleeves rolled up in his red overalls, and he's like this: "I'm all right, Ollie. I'm here. I'm all right." And that was my dad. You know, and I think, again, learned behaviour. I'll get back to work. I'll be fine. I'll be fine.
I'm a bloke. I'm cracking on.
And how much of what we've spoke about today, internalising stuff, overthinking it, letting it explode. I've not realised until I've just said that to you, but like his outbursts were, but probably not recognised, whereas I recognise it with Oliver. And he gets, What are you doing, Oliver?" You know, that one probably my dad's outburst, because, like you said, learned behaviour. Granddad worked in a mill. So if my granddad worked in a mill and was a mill engineer, that means the mills were still open. That means we were still weaving textiles. That's a really old generation, if you look at how far back that is.
Oh, yeah. But again, what did I say before about this stuff building up and building up and building up, and at some point, something's got to give. You know, whether that is that flippant comment about, "You won't be worried about the next paycheck's coming from." Yeah. But that's his little outburst because he's spilled over his threshold for dealing with thought processes. So something in some form or way or another he's got to give. And quite often that can come out as an abrupt explosion of words, whatever those words are,
right? Which
can come across as aggressive. It's not, it's just stress.
Right.
Because you've got, you know, if he had health concerns buzzing around inside.
Yeah.
And then this other stuff, and then this other stuff, and then this other stuff, something's come and spit out.
Yeah.
You're only worried about paycheck.
Yeah.
And when you put it in that sort of context.
Yeah, and I live by 3 rules in my house. I've just lost my train of thought there.
3 rules.
3 rules at home regarding me and Oliver, and everybody. What, you only have 3 rules? And I'm yeah, I do. 1 is love. Okay, we've got a triangle. Love. 2nd rule is respect. And 3rd one is communication. And if any point you take one of those away, everything else falls apart. It's really, I don't even know where I invented it or where I got it from. But one of the things that I constantly drill into Oliver is we need to communicate. Some of that's from a lot of work that I've done within myself. A lot of it's looking in that I just wish my dad had communicated better. I just wish, he'd sit on the phone and talk to a customer for 3 days. One of the things we said in church is, why say in 3 words what you can say in 500? That's one thing. And everybody laughed at it. And it was designed to make everybody chuckle in the service. Because he would sit on the phone for 3 days and not go home talking to a customer if he could have done. And then get off phone and go, bloody hell, they never shut up. But it was my dad, they were doing all talking.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
So I'm conversely the other way around. I'd normally say in 3 words what other people would say in 37, because it's like, well, why would you put all those extra padding in? But,
yeah. But that was my dad's way, you know, and I just wish he would talk at you, but did he communicate? Maybe not until those flippant moments. Maybe that was my dad's way of communicating, you know. So I want to brighten things up. I really, because we've gone on this, and I wanted it to go a little bit like this. I think it needed to happen because there's going to be somebody somewhere who listens to this who's probably going to feel like I'm feeling and need to talk to somebody and don't have that outlet. And now they know that you're here, if they didn't know already, or if they did know of you, now they've probably hopefully got a little bit more confidence to find out where the local club is. And just like, even if they stand outside for 5 minutes before walking in, even if that happens. But one thing I really want you to have an input in is, how do we look after as mates and as family and as friends? You know, what are the, I know personally what I look for or what I pick up on, because I'm not trained whatsoever. But what are you telling people to look out for and help with and be observant with? What do you guys work with?
Tough question. There's no simple answer to that, because everybody's different. There are recognised signs that people may be struggling.
Right.
What I always answer this question with as a starting point: if you are concerned about a friend, a family member, or whatever, you as an individual, and I'm using the term you generally, you as an individual know that person. I don't know that person.
Right.
So within their character, are they doing things different? Things that you wouldn't expect them as a character to do.
And can that be a small thing, a minute thing?
Oh, absolutely. You're not always going to be able to spot these things, because I mentioned this mask. That mask can be very, very clever at times. But there are recognised things. So stuff like self-isolating can be a big warning sign.
Okay.
You know, people that are normally life and soul of the party.
Right, okay.
That suddenly start missing out on not showing to social events.
Right.
Can be, not necessarily, but can be
right.
a sign to start a conversation. You're all right, mate, notice you're dropping out of bits and bats. Don't ever be afraid to have that conversation. It can be absolutely vital.
Can be the conversation starter.
Yeah. But it's not always the case. My son was absolutely the life and soul of the party. You know, a big circle of friends. Used to have a lot of house parties. Used to invite us round.
Awesome.
You would have never guessed.
Right.
That can be like I said, that self-isolation can be a big thing. Just making random excuses for stuff that, again, don't seem to fit that character. Acting out of character. Maybe drinking a bit more than they normally would. Maybe drinking a bit more regularly than they normally would. You know, again, if they're a Friday, Saturday night in pub or club type person, that, well, they're here now Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday as well. I can be an indicator that maybe something somewhere is not quite as right as it could be.
I've had this conversation with myself recently. One thing that seemed to take the edge off of all the pressure was an alcoholic drink. Now, I'm not a big drinker. I can go out and party with everybody, and I did when I was younger. Had a fantastic DJ career that I retired from to become a dad. That, you know, on top of all this, that was my hobby that turned into a great career. Very, very fortunate, very lucky. But I went through a massive period of my life where I just didn't touch alcohol. Just didn't bother me. And I'd go out on the occasional night and I'd get hammered and pissed and feel absolutely shit about having a hangover and probably not touch alcohol again for another 6 months and never have it in the house. What's gone on this year is I'll just get a couple of those small bottles of cider. Those vintage ciders look all right. But it's not a Friday night or a Saturday night when Oliver's not home. It's a Thursday night when Oliver's not home, because I don't have Oliver. And I know I've got this pain and for some reason, although I know it's an antidepressant and I'm very much aware of my body and stuff, it seems to take edge off. And there were a point when I think it would probably around Christmas time when I just thought, this is out of character, but I've only just noticed it.
Mm.
I didn't feel like I was waking up in the morning and needing a drink. But it was out of character and becoming out of character for me. To the point where I think about 6 weeks ago, I tipped it all down the sink. What was left in the house? Like, do you know what? I'm capable of doing it and just being without it. Because although it takes the edge off, it's designed to make you to want it the day after as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's it. And again, you get many instances where, again, people in general will find methods to self-medicate, shall we say.
Right, okay.
Whether that is alcohol or other options.
Yeah.
Because it does give exactly what you just described. It's that instant release, that instant chuck a blanket over it.
Yeah.
Sweep it under the carpet.
Yeah.
Gives you a little bit of an escape.
Yeah.
But exactly like you just said, the hangover from that can be worse.
Completely.
And kind of compound itself because of those escapism methods. You know, like I mentioned, alcohol is a known depressant.
Yeah.
So even though it will give you in that moment that little bit of breathing space, that little escape, the next day, that stuff that you try to escape from is all of a sudden just that little bit heavier.
Yes. Yeah.
So you have another drink to come to shut it out again.
Yeah.
But instead of having a drink,
it's 2.
you actually need 2.
Yeah.
And then if you're not careful, it becomes 3, becomes 4, becomes 5.
I can understand
6.
that.
And all of a sudden, you've got a problem.
You got another problem on top of everything else you've been trying to deal with.
Now, to go back to my son, part of his process, his journey that he's been through, he has self-medicated with pretty much anything you could mention.
Okay.
He fully knew at the time it was not the best thing he could do. It was detrimental.
Right.
But he's also said that he's not sure he would be here if he hadn't, because of things that still go off and still go through,
right,
and the way his mind works against his best interests.
At times.
Right.
He's
managed to leave it all behind now, and, you know.
But that's hard work in itself again, isn't it?
He still maybe is possibly a little too over-reliant on the alcohol side of things, but everything else has gone.
Right.
It served a purpose as much as that period of his life.
Right.
Served a purpose, but he was always aware of why he was doing what he was doing. So it never got to a point where he allowed it to run away with itself, shall we say.
Yeah.
He was aware of what he was doing, why he was doing what he was doing, and that in itself was enough to be able for him to reconcile that within himself. Even though he'd wake up in the morning in fortunately, a friend's dwelling and have to do the walk of shame home in the morning and felt absolutely terrible for it, he was able to, like I say, rationalise that and give it its due credit or not. And he's managed, like I say, he's managed to again move on from that to be in a far better place these days on the back of it. He'll still ring me up and say, I've had a bit of a shit day, you're all right for a chat? It's like, yeah, absolutely fine.
Cool. And
we'll just talk about, sometimes we don't even talk about what it is that's bothering him, we just talk about random stuff, music. We both share same taste in music.
Cool.
You know, I took him to his first gig at 5-year-old.
Amazing.
Went to see Linkin Park in Manchester.
Fantastic. My little nephew will be loving that. He's a big Linkin Park fan when he wants to be.
Been to many, many gigs since. You know, I went to a gig of a band called Machine Head before he were even born.
Right.
We've seen them together 5 times.
Amazing.
In the years since.
Super connection.
I go to every one of his gigs.
Right.
Still jump around down the front like an idiot.
Brilliant.
At my age.
Can't beat being in that mosh pit for
takes me a little while longer to recover from these days, but
bruises are a little bit bigger these days, are they?
I've always come out bruised because it's just part of that process, isn't it? You know, just come home and have a look in the mirror. Yeah, I'm black and blue.
Oh, it's been a good
night.
Yeah.
In fact, he's actually playing this weekend. It's part of it's quite a well-known over in Halifax music venue called Blind Pig in Soby Bridge.
Oh, yeah.
And they're having it's not exactly an all-dayer, but I think it starts at 4:00, but then goes right through to evening. A lot of different bands on. And he's playing as part of that, so I'll be front and centre having a jump around again like a bird.
Fantastic.
In fact, they did one. They played at a place called The Parish in Huddersfield.
Yeah.
They actually played there New Year's Eve.
Did they?
But they played just before, and I got a little carried away with myself, and some idiot filmed it. So I'm they actually put the video on YouTube, and I can't remember what they put, but they put when you let your dad in. It's like there's me jumping around like Burke up front, but there you go.
So a few things that I kind of want to wrap it all up with, because I don't think it could have gone any better, to be honest. I don't know what you think about it.
I think we've covered a few bases, different angles.
It's been a good conversation.
Certainly.
It's been a good conversation. And I always ask this to people who's really had a good effect on me. I always say, will you come back?
I'm sure it's something we can revisit
Brilliant.
At a point to come.
That's really cool. Then I've always got a couple of quick fire questions. I want to talk about where people can find you before we do those fun quick fire questions. I want to know where people can find you and how they can reach out to you.
That's the easy one. So we do have a website.
Cool.
www.andysmanclub.co.uk.
Yeah.
All our groups are listed on that website, all our face-to-face groups, and information about the online option. That list of groups has a search function. Right. So if there's a guy listening to this in whatever part of the UK, Manchester, Sheffield, London, whatever, go on there, put in your location, it will direct you to either our nearest club or the online. If you want to join the online, and again, many guys will use that as a first inroad if they can't quite face going to a face-to-face, send an email into our info@andysmanclub.co.uk email address. They will send you out. It's after 4:00 Mondays, but it's usually, like say, late afternoon, early tea time. They will send you a link for a Google chat.
Okay.
Click on that link, ready for 7:00, and you're in.
Right, cool.
It's as easy as a process. We know it's not an easy thing to do. The process is as easy as it can be to do.
Okay. Anything else that you want to add to how people can, look out for each other? Get people back into the club if they need to go, or do you think we've touched everything that we need to do?
I'll give you a little summation, I suppose, just for any guy that is over 18 that is listening to this and thinks it might be of benefit.
Good.
Here's a question: what have you got to lose?
Yeah.
Right. Worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario, going to an Andy's Man Club, you're going to get a free brew.
Right.
You're going to get a free biscuit.
Yep.
Maybe even 2, if you're lucky.
Awesome.
And it's 2 hours of your life you ain't getting back.
Yeah.
Right? But flip that coin over. There might well be a room full of new mates that you haven't met yet.
Yeah.
There is a massive social scene goes off on the back of Andy's Man Club.
Right, okay.
We've all got hobbies, we've all got interests.
Cool.
I mentioned the photography. I've met many guys through AMC that are into photography.
Cool.
I also used to do quite a lot of mountain biking.
Right.
I've travelled all over this country with guys to go riding bikes that I've met through Andy's Man Club.
Amazing. Right.
You might just, as well as all of that, you might just find information, maybe a bit of inspiration.
Yeah.
For things that you can take into your life to help you improve your situation. Whether that is stuff you're going through right now, whether it's stuff you've gone through in the past, or whether it is stuff that's yet to come.
Yeah.
Got to be worth a shot, right?
Got to be worth a shot. Which one are you at again? Halifax?
I currently oversee 20 groups within the West Yorkshire area, so I'm at a different group
every single week. Cool. My quick fire questions to you. Favourite song of all time?
Oh, no such thing.
Yeah?
My favourite changes daily, hourly.
Yeah, mine too.
Genuinely, right up there at the moment is my son's band. Right up down my street of music.
Right, okay.
The harder side of rock.
Right.
A lot of people that I play it to or pass it on to say they've got elements of Joy Division in there, but with a modern twist.
Right, okay.
Elements of maybe some of your more American grungy type of sound.
Yeah.
Bits of pop punk element, all sort of blended together in this modern, very modern hard rock boiling pot.
Yeah.
They had a song released. When did it come out? Back in the last month. Which is actually one that my son wrote for a previous band he was in, and sort of tweaked it a little bit and brought in and added because my son does a lot of the writing, but the vocalist will write the vocals and then they'll sort of collaborate on them.
Cool.
So there is another lad that does the singing in this band, but my son does a lot of the backing vocals. Now, this current song that they've got out is one that my son wrote in his entirety for a previous incarnation of a band that he'd set up while he were at university.
Right.
Is quite an internal monologue in many respects, which a lot of his music is.
Right.
Some of it's really hard for me to listen to as his dad, but I know he uses that as his personal therapy. So this song is him. It does have the other lad singing on it, but my son starts it. And it's kind of he'll sing the chorus, the other lad comes in with a verse, and they both sing it together, and then it goes back to him and switching over a bit and stuff. So that's an absolute current favourite, and it gets played at least once a day at the moment.
What's your son's band's called?
So they are called Dreadful Creatures.
Dreadful Creatures.
Very much local, sort of Huddersfield, Halifax, Murfield. They all live.
Website? Spotify?
They're on all social medias. They are on Spotify.
Cool. Give them a plug.
Other streaming services are available. Give them a plug. That song's called Martyr.
Right.
Again, yeah.
It's been a real pleasure getting you in, Andy.
Been a pleasure being here.
Been awesome. I'd love to get you back. And brilliant. Oh, brilliant. What a show, mate. Awesome.
The Weld Like Bazza Podcast is sponsored by MS Welding, the #1 welding solution provider. mswelding.co.uk.